Welcome to In Context. This is the Liberty News and War Report. My name is Ken McDermott Rowe.
I'm Gus Canavero.
And we're joined by our military affairs commentator, Marshawn McDermott Rowe. In a recent interview with Rick Rosoff, we briefly touched upon the phenomenal video Kony 2012. And we'd like to look today at a little more detail what this phenomenon is all about.
Just to catch up the audience, I'm sure since this is going to be on YouTube, they all know this already, but the Kony 2012 video has gotten many millions of views. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a very slickly produced documentary. It tries to purport to be something that's a grassroots effort, but it looks to me like it's got a little bit too much financial muscle behind it to be something that is what it pretends to be. And that's just an activist citizen who is really concerned about human rights in Africa. And that's, of course, something that people need to be concerned about. But this... the answer to the problem of Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army is to send the United States military in to intervene to prevent these atrocities from taking place. But many of the things that's not mentioned in the video, and this video has gotten many millions of views, is that Joseph Kony may not even still be alive. He hasn't been heard from in many months, and they've moved out of Uganda into other countries such as Sudan. Now, the United States previously was not interested in intervening, and there's a part in the film where they actually go to Washington and they get the talk to the hand, that most people usually get when they go to Washington, and showing that they're these heartless individuals. They don't care about child soldiers and such. But then now that they're in Sudan, all of a sudden there's interest in Washington in intervening, and we have all these Hollywood celebrities getting on the bandwagon. Quickly, what's your thoughts on the LRA, Joseph Kony, United States intervention into Sudan? Is this just another geopolitical ploy to try to grab the resources in Sudan?
Yes, it is. Just simply, but you characterize, your background is perfect. It truly is. It places things in absolute correct perspective. And this comes on the heels, of course, of the Obama administration deploying an initial contingent of over 100 special forces troops to Uganda, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, the general area, ostensibly to exclusively, fight against the Lord's Resistance Army. This would be the first, openly acknowledged military campaign in Africa since the war against Libya last year by the United States, and its latest, the first post-Cold War overseas military command, U.S. Africa Command. Though I suspect, and I've recently had occasion to write about the fact that the United States is engaged in a counterinsurgency war in Mali, in Northwest Africa, and of course it has, a large military base in Djibouti in Northeast Africa, the Combined Task Force Horn of Africa. And the fact that this video surfaces precisely at the time where Washington is starting a counterinsurgency operation comparable to what it's been doing in the Philippines, incidentally, as well as Colombia and other nations. And 21st century, at least post-George W. Bush administration, American warfare consists of unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, and special operations forces. Those are the two major emphases. And this would be a test case, I suppose, and this Kony video is a perfect public relations, effort to legitimize that effort.
That's right. The group who put out the video is called Invisible Children, and the video, which has gotten at last count 76 million views, which is a phenomenal amount of views in a very short period of time. And put up the banner here. The video was only uploaded on March 5th, and to get 76 million views for a political operation in that short a period of time, I think it's pretty phenomenal. Normally, you get something that's a funny video of someone either hitting someone else on the head with a brick, or maybe cursing, or little kids swearing, something like that. Those usually get tens of millions of views because that's what really caters to the American attention span. But for something like this, especially a half-hour documentary about the turmoil going on in the world, pretty phenomenal, I think. At first glance, looking at this video, it's a very slickly produced video. I did research into them and found that they were getting funding from USAID, which is a known CIA front, though any mentions of USAID on their website have been scrubbed as far as I can tell. That was at last look. And I think what we need to really know here, or really get into, is why all of a sudden all this attention on Joseph Kony. Joseph Kony is the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army. Hasn't been heard from in several months. Let's bring up his picture so we know who we're talking about here. And he was most active in a place in Uganda, and had been pushed out and was moved around, and eventually moved into Sudan. The American government, as portrayed in Kony 2012, was not interested in any intervention in Uganda. But now that it's in Sudan, everyone's all for it. So,
well, Marshawn,
Yeah.
what is this movement all about inside Uganda?
Well, the Lord's Resistance Army is like many, many other resistance movements within Africa, the RUF and other such movements out of Sierra Leone and the like. The Lord's Resistance Army is about, they want to topple, Joseph Kony wants to topple the Ugandan government and create a ultra-Christian utopia. He's a Christian fundamentalist. His organization spawned out of the Holy Trinity movement, which was founded in 1987. The Lord's Resistance Army grew out of that. And it was most highly active under Joseph Kony's leadership in the 90s. Joseph Kony believes himself to be...
which is 20 years ago.
Which was 20 years ago, yes. Believes himself to be the new Messiah and a prophet. And his army has been involved in some of the worst atrocities, mutilations, the chopping off of limbs, cutting off of lips and ears.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating is he was doing this in the 90s. So it's really kind of bizarre because it's like if we suddenly decided to get involved in Cambodia to stop any elements of the Khmer Rouge, which was active in the 1960s. It's bizarre.
Better late than never.
Better late than never, yeah. It's really bizarre when you look at it. It's like, we're going to go into Vietnam and stop the Viet Cong. The war's over.
And at this point, he knows no longer believed to be in Uganda?
Well, the Ugandan army, which has been getting funding from the United States, fought against Joseph Kony in the 90s and early 2000s, forced him into hiding. He fled across the border into the Congo, fought the Congolese, then the Central African Republic, and then the Southern Sudan. Now, the whole while, what's been keeping Joseph Kony alive, because he has no popular support, he's despised, he's a despot, he's been getting supported by the Sudanese government to fight against the Ugandans, who the Ugandans support the independence of South Sudan. Now,
This is the government of Sudan in Khartoum that's allied with China.
Exactly. So it's vicariously the Chinese are fundamentally supporting, because Khartoum doesn't move without permission from the Chinese. The Chinese were supporting the Lord's Resistance Army because we support the Ugandan government.
Now, why do the Chinese have such an interest in Sudan?
Well, Sudan has a lot of oil.
Wow, but Uganda has nothing. So that's why we didn't care when people were getting their arms cut off in Uganda, but now all of a sudden there's a big to-do about Sudan because they've got the black gold.
And the U.S. government projects that an enormous amount of American oil will be coming from Africa in the near future.
And what's brilliant about this is because the borders are so fluid. And it's even better than the Taliban, because the Pakistanis don't want us. If the Taliban's in Pakistan, the Pakistanis don't want us coming into Pakistan. The Iranians don't want us coming into Iran, even though they don't like the Taliban. The Taliban might flee across the border. What's really interesting is the Lord's Resistance Army crosses what is fundamentally a very fluid border between Uganda, Central African Republic, the Congo, and South Sudan. And he's so hated and feared. He's the great boogeyman. But now he's the great boogeyman without any teeth because his army is so dwindled, but he's so feared.
And he may be dead.
He may be dead.
We have no idea.
But he is so feared that the Ugandans, the Central African Republic, and the Congolese will give us free reign to send an army in to control the region.
President Obama's already sent a small
100 advisors.
100 advisors, special forces to the region. And I think our concern is that this film may be an effort of CIA propaganda in order to
build popular
support for a much larger U.S. intervention in Africa.
Let me ask you for a second. Just think about this rationally. Why on God's earth, when UN Human Rights Watch in the 90s, UN Human Rights Watch was saying, we have these atrocities going on, the RUF is murdering people in Sierra Leone, we have people getting their lips and faces chopped off, and the Lord's Resistance Army is doing all this horrible stuff in the 90s. We did nothing. In the the early 2000s, we did nothing. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, suddenly we care? And one was under a Democrat president, one was under a Republican president. So don't tell me it was just one president's fault why we didn't intervene.
Yeah.
Republicans, Democrats, didn't matter. We didn't give a flying you-know-what until now. Suddenly we care. And I'm sure it's not philanthropy that we suddenly care.
I'm sure not. Well, I think that's going to do it for this. quick hitter episode. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.